Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight's story comes from Indonesia, specifically from the outskirts of Jakarta, and it centers around one of the most feared figures in Indonesian and Malay folklore, the Kuntilanak, the vengeful spirit of a woman, often tied to pregnancy, betrayal, or violent death. This is a story about a night shift security guard, an old Kapuk tree, and why people in that neighborhood still walk the long way around rather than cut through one particular shortcut. Something answered when it shouldn't have, and once you hear how, you'll understand why no one goes there after midnight. Stay with me until the end, because after the story, I'll explain the beliefs behind the Kuntilanak, why trees and certain smells are a warning sign, and what locals say you must never do if you hear her laugh. In Indonesia, especially on Java, the Kuntilanak is almost universal. Ask any ojol driver, security guard, or late-night shop owner, and they'll have at least one story. She's usually described as a pale woman in long, loose white clothing, with long black hair covering her face, tied to the deaths of women, especially those who died during pregnancy or childbirth, or were betrayed and left broken. People say she haunts big old trees, pohon beringin, banyans, pohon kapuk, cheba, cotton trees, empty houses, or the back alleys near graveyards. There's a particular detail people in Jakarta mention: the sudden smell of frangipani or jasmine late at night, even when there are no flowers around. If you smell it, they say, don't call out. Don't respond if she calls your name. The story I'm about to tell you happened to a man I'll call Budi. Budi was a night security guard in a small office complex in East Jakarta, not far from a busy main road, but cut off enough that at night it got unusually quiet. The complex had 3 low-rise office buildings, a narrow parking lot, and at the back, a chain-link fence. Just beyond that fence was an overgrown vacant lot with one huge kapuk tree that everyone in the area seemed to avoid, especially after sunset. Budi wasn't a superstitious guy. He was in his late 30s, exoject driver, used to Jakarta's chaos. Before he took the job, the only warning he got from the previous security guard was casual. Kalau malam, jangan ngerokok dekat pagar belakang. Ribet. At night, don't smoke near the back fence. It'll be troublesome. When Budi asked why, the guy just shook his head and said, Pokoknya jangan. Just don't. The first strange thing happened about 2 weeks into the job. It was a weekday, around 1:30 a.m. Budi was making his rounds, flashlight in one hand, radio clipped to his shirt, and a plastic chair sat near the front gate where he usually sat. That night was especially still. The traffic noise from the main road was faint, like it was muffled. He did his usual walk. Building A, check the locks. Building B, check the doors. Building C, shine the light through the glass. Everything was normal. On the way back, he decided to cut behind Building C to shave a minute off his round. That path took him closer to the back fence and the big kapuk tree. As he walked, he caught a smell. Floral, strong, almost too strong. Jasmine, but more concentrated, like perfume. There were no flower bushes in that back corridor, and he knew that. He'd been there every night. He paused, sniffed again. The smell was there, hovering. It wasn't unpleasant, just out of place. He shrugged it off. Maybe someone in the nearby houses sprayed something, he thought. City life was like that. A few nights later, same hour, the jasmine smell came back. This time, Budi noticed it appeared only when he was near the back fence. He shone his flashlight toward the vacant lot, sweeping over the tall grass, the broken concrete, and finally up into the enormous kapuk tree. Nothing, just branches, the white cotton-like kapuk pods hanging, swaying slightly in the wind. He lit a cigarette and stood there, leaning slightly on the fence, listening to the buzzing of insects. The jasmine smell grew stronger, almost syrupy. His skin prickled for no clear reason. Then he heard it, soft, like a woman sighing. Just one breath. Ha! He froze, cigarette halfway to his mouth. He listened. Distant motorbikes, a dog barking, then quiet. The sigh hadn't come from an apartment window or the street. It felt close, like it was right behind the fence. Budi told himself it might have been a cat or a bird. He finished his cigarette quickly and went back to the front gate, ignoring the urge to keep looking over his shoulder. Things escalated the following weekend. It was a Sunday night turning into Monday morning. The offices had been empty all weekend. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving the asphalt damp and reflecting the faint yellow light from the street lamps. Around 2 a.m., Budi was in the small guard post at the front, watching YouTube on his phone with the volume low. The CCTV monitor, an old, slightly flickering unit, showed all 8 camera feeds: the front gate, each building entrance, the side alleys, and the back fence. As he sat there, something caught his eye on the screen. Camera 7, the one facing the back fence and kapuk tree, flickered like static. For a split second, the image warped, lines running across it. He frowned, set his phone down, and leaned closer. The image stabilized. The dim view of the back fence returned. The tree in the background, its trunk dark against the patchy light from a nearby street lamp. The tall grass in front of it. And then, in the corner of the frame, at the edge of the fence, he saw hair. Long black hair hanging down like a curtain, as if someone was standing just off frame, facing the tree, their head bowed. Budi blinked, thinking it might be a cable shadow. He tapped the monitor with his knuckle. The hair shifted, a slight, unnatural sway, independent of the movement of the tree branches. He felt his throat go dry. Then the jasmine smell hit him. Not from outside, inside the guard post. Thick, sweet, suffocating. There were no plants in that booth, just plastic chairs and stale cigarette smoke. He stood up quickly, stepped out into the night air, hoping it was some kind of gas or cleaner someone left behind. Outside, the smell was stronger. From somewhere near the back of the complex, carried on a wind that didn't quite feel like a wind, came a faint sound. A laugh, but it was wrong. High, breathy, and cut off halfway, like someone choking on their own giggle. He. He felt every hair on his body stand on end. Budi told himself he had to check the back fence. That was his job. If someone had snuck in, maybe a prankster, maybe a thief, he needed to know. He took his flashlight, radio in hand, and walked slowly down the side of Building B, his boots scuffing against the damp pavement. Each step seemed too loud. The air felt heavy, like he was walking underwater. As he approached the back, the jasmine smell became almost unbearable. His eyes watered. The kapuk tree loomed above the fence, its thick trunk splitting into long, arching branches. The cotton pods looked like pale, hanging shapes. He stopped 3 meters from the fence. His flashlight's beam trembled just slightly as he lifted it. "Hello?" he called, trying to sound annoyed instead of afraid. Siapa di sana? Who's there? No answer, just a hum of distant traffic. He swept the beam along the fence. Grass, bits of trash, concrete, nothing. Then he tilted the flashlight up toward the lower branches of the kapuk tree. For a heartbeat, there was only bark and leaves. Then he saw her. She was sitting on a thick branch, about 3 meters up, knees drawn up close to her chest, her long white dress hanging down in tatters. Her hair was impossibly long, a black veil covering her face and spilling over her knees. Her bare feet dangled, toes pale against the dark bark. His hand went numb. The flashlight beam wavered. She didn't move at first. Then very slowly, her head began to lift. The hair parted just enough for him to see a sliver of a face. Skin too white, lips too red, like something painted. The corners of her mouth stretched, wider and wider, into an unnatural smile that never reached her eyes. And then he heard it, directly in his ears, though her mouth only barely moved. Budi. She had used his name. He hadn't said it out loud, hadn't spoken to anyone. He tried to step back, but his legs wouldn't obey. His chest seized up. The jasmine smell was a wall now, pressing into him. Her head cocked to the side, with a crack that sounded like breaking twigs. Temenin aku. Keep me company. Her voice was wrong, layered, like more than one woman, speaking slightly out of sync, echoing inside his skull. Somewhere inside the fear, Budi remembered a thing he'd heard from older relatives. If confronted by a Kuntilanak, you don't scream her name. You don't answer questions directly, and you try, if you can, to recite prayers or verses. He forced his dry tongue to move and began to whisper what he knew of Ayat Kursi, stumbling over the words, barely audible. His voice shook. As he muttered, he broke eye contact and forced himself to look down at the ground, focusing on the wet concrete at his feet. One step back, then another. The laughter started again, louder now, echoing between the buildings. He. But there was anger in it, frustration, like something clawing at glass. He didn't look back. He walked as steadily as he could, each step feeling like it might be his last, until he reached the side of the building. Only then did he break into a run, sprinting to the front guard post, slamming the door, and turning on every light he could. The jasmine smell lingered for hours. Budi quit that job the following week. He never told the building manager the full story. He just said the hours were too hard, that his health wasn't good. To his surprise, the manager didn't argue. Instead, he asked quietly, "Kamu juga lihat, ya? You saw her too, didn't you?" Apparently, Budi wasn't the first security guard to leave after a few weeks. The previous one, the man who had told him not to smoke near the back fence, had once been found sitting in the guard post at dawn, mumbling, refusing to go near the back cameras ever again. Budi moved to a different job, daytime only, at a small warehouse. He says he's never smelled that overpowering jasmine again. But sometimes, when he closes his eyes at night, he still sees the curve of that unnatural smile and hears his name spoken in that layered, broken voice. Was it stress? Sleep deprivation? A trick of old CCTV equipment? An imagination? Maybe the jasmine came from a neighbor's garden, the sigh from an animal in the lot, the hair, a tangle of cables and branches. But if it was nothing, why did several guards, over several years, all refuse to patrol that same back fence? In Javanese and Indonesian belief, the Kuntilanak embodies unresolved pain, Women who die unjustly or alone or in childbirth, their spirits twisted by grief. She's tied to certain trees, to still humid nights, to that sudden heavy perfume of jasmine or frangipani. Older generations say you should never mock her, never whistle at night, and never follow a disembodied voice calling your name. Budi listened. Eventually, he walked away, and for now, he's okay. But somewhere in East Jakarta, that kapuk tree is still standing. The office complex is still there, and the night shift always has an opening. What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true ghost stories from across Asia. All right, let's move from Jakarta to another Indonesian city, Surabaya, where the same entity, the Kuntilanak, is said to haunt not a tree this time, but the top floor of an old abandoned hospital. For this second story, we're heading to Surabaya in East Java, an old port city with a lot of history and more than a few abandoned buildings. This one revolves around an ex-medical student who took a part-time job cataloging equipment in a decommissioned hospital, a place the staff quietly warned him not to visit alone at night, especially not the maternity wing. Locals say a Kuntilanak has made that floor her territory, and anyone who disturbs her will leave with something attached to them. In this story, someone didn't listen. Stay until the end, because I'll share how abandoned hospitals became a hotspot for Kuntilanak stories, and what Surabaya residents believe you must never bring home from these places. Andy was in his mid-20s, a final year medical student at a university in Surabaya. Money was tight, so when a lecturer offered him a temporary gig, helping catalog and photograph old medical equipment for disposal at a closed-down government hospital, he accepted immediately. The hospital had been partially shut for years. A new, modern facility had replaced it, leaving the old one standing as a kind of ghost. Literally, if you believe the rumors. Some sections were still used for storage and occasional low-risk clinics during the day. But entire floors were locked up at night. When Andy first arrived, a daytime security guard, an older man with tired eyes, walked him through the building. "Lantai 3, jangan lama-lama." "Yeah," the guard said. "Don't stay too long on the third floor." "Kenapa?" Andy asked, half smiling. The guard's answer was vague. "Udara nggak enak di sana." "The air isn't good up there." Folklore in the halls. In Indonesia, hospitals and Kuntilanak stories go together almost too easily. You've got stories of women who die in childbirth, babies who don't survive, families who never get closure. In some local versions, a Kuntilanak fixates on places where that kind of pain is concentrated. Delivery wards, old maternity wings, even stairwells where someone jumped or fell. Nurses often talk about hearing a woman sobbing in empty wards, or smelling fresh blood and jasmine where there's no one scheduled. But these stories typically stay hushed, shared privately among staff. Andy, like many medical students, had become somewhat numb to horror stories. He assumed most of them were coping mechanisms. Death is part of the job. Turning it into a ghost story makes it easier to carry. He didn't believe in Kuntilanak. Not really. Andy's work schedule was flexible. He had access from afternoon to evening, and sometimes, when the data backlog was serious, he'd stay later than he was supposed to. The job was simple. Go room by room, photograph old equipment, note down serial numbers, make lists. The first odd thing happened on the second evening. He was on the third floor, in an old ward that used to be part of the maternity wing. The corridor was long, with patient rooms on each side. The fluorescent lights were unreliable. Some flickered, some stayed off entirely. He worked with his phone flashlight and a small LED lamp he'd brought. Around 7:30 p.m., most staff had gone home. The building's noises changed. Less chatter, more echoes. He was alone on that floor, registering old beds and IV stands. As he was writing, he heard a faint sound down the corridor. A soft, rhythmic shh, 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 like fabric brushing the floor. He looked up. The corridor was empty. The LED lamp cast weak pools of light, leaving shadows between doorways. He listened. The sound stopped. He went back to writing. A minute later, the sound returned. Shh, shh, shh. This time, it sounded slightly closer. "Andy?" he called out, thinking maybe a nurse or cleaner was still around. No answer. He stepped into the hallway, shining his phone light into the distance. At the end of the corridor, near the old nurse's station, he thought he saw something pale disappear around a corner. A quick movement, like the hem of a white gown. "Bu?" he tried. "Perawat?" "Nurse?" Silence. He checked. No one. The nurse's station was dark, the chairs empty. He assumed it was just his eyes, tired from hours of looking at numbers. On the fourth evening, he stayed even later. He'd underestimated how many items were in storage. By 9 p.m., he was determined to finish the third floor, so he wouldn't have to come back again. It was too quiet. The security guard had already warned him that the building's backlights would be cut at 10 p.m., so he knew he should hurry. While photographing an old incubator in a disused neonatal room, he caught a smell he didn't expect. Metal and disinfectant, which made sense, but under that, a hint of something floral. Jasmine again, very faint. The windows were shut, dust lining the frames, no flowers anywhere near. He checked his bag, wondering if someone had sprayed air freshener earlier. Nothing. As he leaned over the incubator to get the label, he heard it, a soft wet sound, like someone gently sobbing into a pillow. He froze, halfway bent. The sound came from the next room over, a private delivery room with the door half open. It wasn't loud, just steady. A woman's cry attempting to be quiet, as if she didn't want anyone to hear. Every logical part of him knew this ward was closed. No patients, no staff assigned up here at night. But the sound was so human, it bypassed logic completely. "Bah," he called again, voice cracking. "Ada yang sakit? Hello? Is someone in pain?" The sobbing stopped instantly, cut off mid-breath. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound. He should have gone downstairs. He should have, by all rational standards, called security and left the floor. Instead, curiosity, mixed with the stubbornness of someone who believes they're above superstition, made him push the delivery room door open further. The bed was empty. The stool, the monitors, all covered with thin sheets of dust. The air was colder here, enough that he could see the faintest mist when he exhaled. He stepped in and swept his light around. In the far corner, near the sink, something was written on the wall in a faint reddish-brown smear. Old, barely legible, partly scrubbed away. "Jangan tinggalkan aku. Don't leave me." He took a photo, intending to laugh about it later with friends. Another example of morbid hospital humor. But the jasmine smell was stronger now, and his hands were shaking. After that night, things escalated quickly. He started hearing footsteps behind him in the corridor, bare feet, light, occasionally accompanied by that soft shh, dragging sound. Whenever he turned, there was nothing. He found equipment tags moved from the piles where he'd left them, placed neatly on beds, or balanced on door handles, like someone was playing a game. One evening, as he reviewed photos on his laptop at home, he finally saw something he couldn't shrug off. In a series of pictures of an empty ward, taken in quick succession, the first two were normal. In the third, near the far window, there was the faint outline of a figure, a woman in white, hair obscuring her face, standing with her back to the camera. In the fourth photo, taken seconds later, she was closer, still blurred, but undeniably there. He hadn't seen her when he was there. He'd been alone, or thought he was. He told himself it was just motion blur, a trick of the light, a glitch. But he started sleeping with the lights on. The real breaking point came on his final night at the hospital. He only had a few rooms left on the third floor. The security guard, noticing how late it was getting, frowned. "Malam Jumat lagi," the guard muttered. "Tonight's Thursday night going into Friday." In local belief, Thursday night, Malam Jumat, is a potent time spiritually. Many people say ghosts and spirits are more active then. The guard tried to convince Andy to finish another day, but Andy, pressured by deadlines, insisted. By 9:30 p.m., Andy was alone on the third floor, packing up his gear. He decided to take one last walk down the corridor to make sure he hadn't missed any rooms. As he passed the old nurse's station, every light in the corridor flickered once and died. Complete darkness. His heart rate spiked. He turned on his phone flashlight. The small circle of light pushed the darkness back just enough. The jasmine smell rushed at him like a wave, overwhelming, nauseating. From behind him, just at the edge of the light, came a whisper, right next to his left ear. Intimate, too close. "Andy." He spun around, swinging the light wildly. Empty hallway. Then, directly ahead, about 10 meters away, at the intersection where the corridor turned, he saw her. A woman in a long, white hospital gown, stained faintly at the hem. Her hair was long and black, hanging straight, covering her face entirely. Her head was slightly bowed. Her feet were bare, toes pale against the tiled floor. She wasn't hazy or translucent. She was solid, real, standing under a dead fluorescent tube. She took a step toward him without lifting her feet, the sound dragging across the tiles. "Shh, shh, shh." His body locked. He couldn't breathe. "Kamu doctor? Yeah, you're a doctor, aren't you?" Her voice echoed from everywhere at once, from the walls, the ceiling, inside his skull. He knew his mouth was open, but no sound came out. "Kenapa kamu nggak nolong aku? Why didn't you help me?" He wanted to scream that he wasn't even there when she died, that he didn't even work at this hospital when it was active, but the guilt in her voice pushed reason aside. It was the generalized guilt of every patient doctors couldn't save, condensed into a single accusation. She moved closer, 3 meters now. He could see her fingers, twisted, nails too long, stained darker at the tips. His phone flickered, the light dimmed. Without thinking, he did the only thing he could think of. He dropped his backpack, shut his eyes, and bolted blindly down the corridor toward the stairwell, hand scraping along the wall to guide him. Behind him, the dragging footsteps sped up, becoming a wet, slapping sound. the air around his ears filled with her laughter, high, broken, spiraling up into a scream. Just as his hand hit the cold metal of the stair rail, something icy grabbed the back of his shirt and yanked. He felt fingernails scratch his skin through the fabric, a flash of pain across his back. He stumbled forward, half falling down the first few steps. The stairwell lights were still on. The third-floor door slammed behind him with such force it rattled the glass. He didn't look back. He ran all the way down to the ground floor, breath ragged, vision tunneling. Security guards saw his face and didn't ask any questions. He just muttered, "Saya sudah bilang. I told you already. You might think the story ends with Andy quitting and never returning. He did quit, yes. He refused to go back, even during the day. But that wasn't the end. For weeks after, he woke up around 3 a.m., heart racing, to the smell of jasmine in his room. At first, he thought it was from outside, maybe a neighbor's plant. But the scent was too sudden, too concentrated. It would vanish as soon as he sat up. He started having the same dream repeatedly, walking down that third-floor corridor, her following just out of sight, whispering, "Kenapa kamu nggak nolong aku, doctor? Why didn't you help me, doctor?" One evening, while changing his shirt, his girlfriend noticed long, thin scratches across his upper back. They were in the exact spot where he'd felt that yank on the stairwell. They hadn't been there before. He hadn't told her everything, just that something weird had happened at the hospital. She frowned and said quietly, "Kayaknya dia ikut kamu pulang. I think she followed you home. He went to a kiai, a local religious elder who performed a small ruqyah, an Islamic spiritual cleansing. The elder said, gently, that something had attached itself to him, drawn by the mix of his disbelief and the hospital's history. The sessions helped. The scratches faded. The jasmine visits decreased, then stopped. But here's the part that unsettles Andy the most. Whenever he walks past any hospital now, even busy modern ones, he feels watched. Mirrors in hospital corridors show flickers behind him, just out of frame. And maternity wards? He refuses to go near them. Maybe it was stress. Final year medical students are under intense pressure, sleep deprived, overworked, inside buildings saturated with death and suffering. His brain might have turned that weight into a haunting. Maybe the photo glitch was just that, a glitch. Maybe the scratches were from a door frame or bed he brushed against and didn't remember. But hospitals all across Indonesia, especially old ones, share the same quiet stories. A woman in white, hair over her face, wandering maternity wards, whispering to doctors and nurses who couldn't save her or her child. A Kuntilanak, not bound to one tree or one room, but to the whole system of pain. And if something like that can attach once, who's to say it can't attach again? What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true ghost stories from across Asia. Now, we've seen the Kuntilanak in an office complex and a hospital. For our third and final story, we're heading to a city that literally shares her name, Pontianak in West Kalimantan, where locals say the river and the wind still carry her voice. Our last story tonight takes us to Pontianak in West Kalimantan, a city whose very name is tied to the Kuntilanak. Local legends say the city was once so haunted by her cries that its founder fired cannons into the forest to drive her away. This story is about a young boatman on the Kapuk River, a late-night crossing, and a voice that wouldn't stop calling from the water. Some people in Kuntilanak say if the river answers you, you might not come back alone. Stick around till the end, and I'll share how Kuntilanak's origin legend connects to the Kuntilanak, and the river taboos locales still follow today. Let's call him Rian. Rian grew up on the banks of the Kapuk River, the wide brown artery that runs through Kuntilanak. His family ran a small Kitinting boat service, narrow motorboats that ferried people and goods between neighborhoods. He'd been on the water since before he could properly swim. Kuntilanak is different from Jakarta or Surabaya. There, Kuntilanak stories feel like they belong to alleys and buildings. In Kuntilanak, she belongs to the land and the river. Her name is everywhere, on souvenirs, in ghost tours, in half-joking, half-serious warnings from older relatives. The old legend says that when Sharif Abdurrahman, the city's founder, came to this area in the 18th century, he was disturbed by the cries and laughter of a Kuntilanak in the forest. To drive her away, he fired cannons into the trees before establishing his settlement. That's the story they tell, at least. So, growing up, Rian heard all the standard advice. Don't whistle at night near the river. Don't shout challenges into the dark. No daring the spirits to show themselves. If a woman's voice calls your name from the water, don't answer, no matter how familiar it sounds. Rian thought these were just ways to keep kids from messing around and falling in. One humid evening in the dry season, when the air felt like damp cloth and the mosquitoes were relentless, Rian took a late job he shouldn't have. A regular customer, let's call him Pak Hadi, needed to cross the river around 11 p.m. The usual boatman had gone home, so Rian volunteered. Easy money, he thought. The Kapuk at night could be beautiful. Dark water reflecting scattered lights, the breeze cooler than on land. He and Pa Hadi made the crossing without incident. The engine hummed steadily. The water lapped softly against the hull. Once, he dropped the man off on the opposite bank. Rian turned the boat around, heading back alone. The middle of the river was the darkest. The city lights on both sides looked distant, like separate worlds. Above him, the sky was cloudy, no stars. Halfway across, the engine coughed. He frowned, adjusted the throttle. The motor sputtered again, then carried on. The sound echoed strangely over the water. That was when he heard it, faint at first. Rian? A woman's voice, soft, carried by the wind. It sounded like it came from the left side of the boat, low, almost at water level. He froze, hands still on the throttle. The voice came again, slightly louder. Rian. This time, it sounded exactly like his older cousin who lived nearby. A cousin who sometimes helped with the boat and liked to joke around. He told himself it must be an echo from the riverbank. Maybe someone was calling someone else. Sound carries strangely over water at night. He didn't answer. He gripped the throttle and stared ahead, pretending he hadn't heard. The engine coughed again and lost power for a second. The boat slowed, the current starting to push it sideways. As the boat drifted, the river felt bigger somehow, the darkness heavier. The voice came a third time, from the opposite side now, a closer. Rian, kenapa nggak jawab? Rian, why don't you answer? Goosebumps rippled up his arms. That sentence, those exact words, were something his cousin often said when he ignored her messages. Jangan jawab, he muttered to himself, repeating what his grandmother had drilled into him. Don't answer. He yanked at the starter rope. The engine whined, failed, then caught weakly. The boat jerked forward, but the current fought back. From behind him, almost at his ear, a whisper. Kalau kamu nggak jawab, aku datang. Yeah, if you don't answer, I'll come to you. He spun around, heart hammering. No one. Just the swirling black surface of the Kapuas. The faint shapes of logs and debris drifting by. The jasmine smell arrived then, sudden, out of place. There were no flower bushes in the middle of the river, yet the scent was unmistakable, overlaying the muddy river smell. His hands shook on the throttle. Ryan was a practical guy. He knew engines. He knew the river. So he forced himself to focus. Get the motor running. Get to shore. Deal with the rest later. But the engine had other plans. It coughed, surged weakly, then died completely. Silence. Just the gentle slap of water and the distant barking of dogs. The current turned the boat slowly, the city lights on the banks sliding out of alignment. The jasmine smell thickened. The hair on the back of his neck rose. Something bumped lightly against the hull on the left side. Then again, not the soft thud of floating wood. This was sharper, like knuckles tapping. Tuck, tuck, tuck. He forced himself not to look. The tapping moved to the right side, closer. The boat rocked slightly, as if something was swimming underneath, testing its weight. Then, from just over the side, inches away, Rian, he couldn't help it. His eyes snapped toward the sound. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, breaking the surface slowly, like someone rising from a bath, came a head of long, black, dripping hair. It clung to a pale face beneath, only partially visible as it tilted upward. The eyes were wrong, too wide, too dark, reflecting no light from the shore. The lips were almost blue, but when they curled into a smile, the teeth were sharp, too many, like tiny needles. Water streamed down her hair in long, dark lines, back into the river. She looked at him with a familiarity that made his stomach drop. Ayo ikut. Come with me. Her free hand, if you could call it that, gripped the side of the boat. The fingers were long, the nails dark, digging into the wood without leaving marks. The boat leaned slightly toward her, like it wanted to tip. Every reflex screamed at Ryan to jump to the other side, to push her off, to scream. But another part of him, the part raised on river stories, knew panic would flip the boat. He did something that surprised even him. He shut his eyes, bowed his head slightly, and began to recite every prayer he knew, stumbling over words, mixing verses he'd heard in the mosque with the simple supplications his grandmother had taught him as a child. He didn't shout. He whispered, voice shaking. The wood under his hands felt cold, colder than the night air. The boat settled more heavily on her side. The jasmine smell filled his lungs like fog. Her voice came again, but now it sounded layered, echoing inside his chest. Ryan, lihat aku. Rian, look at me. He squeezed his eyes tighter and kept reciting, faster now, barely coherent. After what felt like minutes, but was probably seconds, the pressure on the boat lessened. The tapping stopped. The jasmine smell thinned, blending back into mud and diesel and river water. He dared to open one eye a sliver. The surface beside him was empty, just dark ripples. The engine, without him touching it, sputtered once, twice, and came back to life on its own, chugging weakly but steadily. He didn't question it. He gripped the throttle and aimed straight for the nearest patch of light on the bank, not caring whose dock it was. When he finally stepped onto solid ground, legs shaking. An old man, sitting on a plastic chair by the riverside, watched him quietly. "Mesin mati ya?" the man asked. "Engine died, huh?" Rian nodded, swallowing hard. The old man pointed at the river, his gaze never leaving the dark water. "Dia suka yang sendirian di tengah," he said. "Kalau dia panggil, jangan jawab. Kalau dia datang, jangan lihat. She likes the ones alone in the middle. If she calls, don't answer. If she comes, don't look." Ryan wanted to dismiss it as coincidence, but the old man's next words made his blood run cold. "Tadi dia pakai suara sepupumu, ya? Yang sering bantu di perahu. She used your cousin's voice, right? The one who often helps with the boat." He hadn't mentioned his cousin to anyone on that side of the river. After that night, Rian refused late crossings alone. He still works the boat, because that's his life, but he makes sure there's always at least one other person on board after dark. If the engine starts acting up in the middle, he doesn't look over the side, no matter what he hears, no matter who the voice sounds like. Sometimes, though, when the river is especially quiet and the fog rolls low over the water, he swears he can smell Jasmine for no reason. And occasionally, he hears a faint splashing just outside the boat's light, circling. Was it a hallucination brought on by fear and the eeriness of the river at night? The human brain is wired to pattern match, to hear voices and random sounds, especially when names are involved. Engines fail, currents shift, debris knocks against boats. But Pontianak isn't just any city. It carries the Kuntilanak in its name and in its stories. Locals avoid calling out across the river at night, avoid boasting aloud that ghosts aren't real, and teach their kids that some voices on the water aren't meant to be answered. And if that night was just in Rian's head, why did the engine restart on its own right after she let go? What do you think happened? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true ghost stories from across Asia.